With more on what this could mean for the GOP race, we're joined again by Niall Stanage, White House columnist at The Hill. Niall, thanks for staying with us.
Good to be with you.
Is the endorsement from Governor Kim Reynolds enough to turn things around for the DeSantis campaign?
It's difficult to say that it's going to be enough. The value of endorsements is hotly debated, but it is certainly a big injection of energy for a campaign that has been struggling pretty badly. Kim Reynolds is very popular with Iowa Republicans. There was one poll a while back said her approval rating with likely caucus scores was north of 80% in Iowa. So her endorsement is important. It has indeed been much sought after. But look, Governor DeSantis is almost 30 points behind former President Trump, even in Iowa. That's a very long piece of ground to try to make up.
And moving to the front runner of the Republican field, there are new polls that show former President Trump is leading President Biden in 5 of the 6 key swing states. Today is exactly 1 year until the general election. What is the Biden campaign likely taking note of what they have to do over the next year?
So on one level, the Biden campaign have been talking about the fact that polls a year out from an election are not always correct predictors of the overall result. I mean, President Obama, for example, at one point looked like he was struggling, and obviously he won re-election. But look, there are serious challenges here for the Biden campaign. They have to sell his economic record better. They have to show that he is fully competent to serve a second term. And that, I think, is a difficult thing to do if voters have made their mind up to the contrary. We know from opinion polls that there is enormous concern about President Biden's age. He is the oldest president in U.S. history at this point. And that's not something that I think voters are going to be easily persuaded to change their minds about.
You know, the president is expected to give a speech about the economy and Bidenomics, with much of the political focus right now being on the Middle East, of course. How much will this particular message resonate at this time?
You know, the economy is always important in American elections and in American politics. So I think making the argument is a politically astute thing. Actually, you could argue that there are these concerns at home, whether it's the economy or component parts of it, like inflation and interest rates, that will ultimately be more important than what happens overseas. But that's a separate argument from saying, do voters believe that President Biden would be the best person to take the economy forward beyond 2024? Polling right now suggests they don't think that, but that, of course, is why he has to make the argument.
Yeah, and then let's talk about Nikki Haley, because she is building some momentum right now, moving up in the polls, still third. What would she need to do in this next debate performance? What topics matter most to voters right now that could possibly push her up to this second place?
So, I mean, one of the things is simply there will be the personal confrontation between her and Governor DeSantis, with whom she's duking it out for second place. She's rising and he has been plateauing or falling. In terms of issues, I mean, having just downplayed the importance of overseas issues, Nikki Haley does have that United Nations ambassador experience. She is a very, very aggressive supporter both of U.S. interests in relation to Israel and the war in Ukraine. She strongly believes in funding that war. But also, I think she will need to show her full range, talking about the economy, connecting her voice with what people want to hear talked about, you know?
And Niall, one more question. Nikki Haley putting forth her plan for the border recently as she's pledging to close the border. She also is saying when it comes to undocumented immigrants who are already in this country that they should be deported. Is this likely to resonate within her own party? And what about for the American populace at large?
It's likely to resonate within her own party, where I think the more tough line you adopt on immigration and illegal immigration, the better you do. It isn't a party that has a moderate wing, so to speak, on the immigration issue. When you're talking about the electorate writ large, I think that does become a different question. Obviously, you have more people who are more liberal on immigration in the general electorate, but you also run into issues of how is this going to be done? How are you actually going to, mass deport people? I think that is one of the questions that arises when you start making that argument in the general election.
Niall Stanage, appreciate the context and time. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.